Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art.
Good day, spiritual artists. This is Chris Miller, your host for the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Wow, I am jazzed today because I want to share something with you that I think is critical for the artist and also the person that is doing the art of being human. So first, let me go back a little bit. Let me go back and talk to you about my book. When I wrote the book, The Spiritual Artist, I was focusing on how do I get into that place. You know, that place, some people call it flow, some people call it connection, where when you're creating, time passes. You forget that time, you don't even notice time. And you're so caught up in the moment, in the present, that you create wonderful things. And I believe it's because of something, some greater power flowing through you as you. So it's a combination of you and this greater power creating on the canvas. But something I want to share with you that's really important to this, because the whole book is about, suspending judgment, getting in a quiet space, listening to your thoughts, letting emotions flow through you freely, not holding them back. But all of that works only when you're willing to stretch the time that you're in that place. Did you hear that? Only when you're willing to stretch the time that you're in that place. And I see this all the time. You'll see an artist rushing through the process. I find myself rushing through the process. I've been there before, and I'll put something on the canvas and I'll look at it and I know how to finish it. Let's face it, we all develop tools. We have those tools with us for the rest of our lives. And so I know I could finish it and make it look good. And not only make it look good enough to sell. But is that why you are a spiritual artist? I don't think so. For me, it wasn't about getting to the end of the journey. It was about the journey itself. And so when I realized that it's important to stretch that time when you're in that place that you're listening. So I want to go back to my book, The Spiritual Artist, and talk to you about the chapter on listening, because in that chapter, which I don't think I've ever talked about before, I talk about Deepak Chopra. He introduces a concept called the gap, minding the gap. The gap is that place where you're receiving divine intuition. It's that space of emptiness. He calls it the place of pure possibilities. I love that because that's where it is. That is where the possibilities are. So speaking to the artists that are listening to this, when you go into the studio and you put some paint down on the canvas and you rush to the end because I know how to do this. I know how to make this look good. You are not being present. You're rushing into the future. Or if you look at your canvas and you remember something you did weeks before, a year before, and you go, this looks familiar. I can make it look like that. Well, what is the point of that? What is the point of making something look like something you did before? We are here to be original creators, to create in the moment and be present. So I ask you, minding the gap is about just letting that place, stretching that place. When you're moving the paint around on the canvas, don't rush to make it look good. Don't hurry to finish it. Just let it flow. Play with it. It's that state of play. Move things around and listen. Listen for that guidance. So much in our lives, we rush and we don't let spirit tell us the next step. I'm going to give you my real life scenario here. Some of you who've been following the podcast might know that I talked earlier about creating space in your life. If you want something new, move something out and create space. But you have to trust. You have to trust that that space will fill with something exciting and new. And the only way you can do that is to let it have time. Let it have time. So if you're thinking about changing jobs, or you're thinking about moving on to a new relationship, or even a new artistic discipline, let yourself have some moments of just emptiness, just listening to where it can go. The longer you stretch that time, the more possibilities come up. So one of the things I think is so successful for me with the book is when I paint, I try to stretch that time and discover new aspects of my creative DNA. I am discovering new possibilities. If I rush to the end, if I fill it with something that I've done before, or I know what's needed out there and I just follow a system or recipe, that's not being in the moment. That is not expanding your creative potential. So in life, if some of you might not know this, I decided to leave a corporate position and open up the space in my life for new possibilities. So I didn't rush into taking another job. And people would say to me, well, where are you going? Where are you going? I don't know. I just decided I wanted to paint. I wanted to speak. I wanted to teach the spiritual artist. I don't know how, and I don't have to know how. All I have to do is set the intention. So that's what I'm asking you to do. You set the intention of what you want, but don't try to figure out how to make it happen. In the art world, you set the intention. I want to do something, whatever it might be. It might be with a message. You want to make a political statement. You want to just make something that is of beauty. Set the intention and just wait. Let it move around on the canvas. Play with it. Discover and explore new aspects of yourself. So this is a wonderful, wonderful lesson for people out there in your life too. How often are you running into a new job, a new relationship, anything? How often do you run into it without giving it the time to just creatively gestate, without engaging and letting spirit step in and guide you? Now, back to my story. I'm finding that all these possibilities are popping up. Opportunities to work freelance, to install my art in certain locations, to teach and to speak. But if I had taken a job, if I had rushed into a new job, something that occupied 40 hours of my time or 60 hours of my time, how would I create the space for new things to happen? Same thing with you. If you're unhappy with your relationship, you don't leave it to jump into another relationship immediately. You leave the relationship and then you just be single, enjoy it. Let's see what happens. See who comes into your life and don't rush. If it's a job, try it. It's very scary. I know it's scary to be in the gap. It is very scary to be in the gap, but you have to have faith. Have to have faith that the principle of nature, and I love this principle. The principle of nature is, I'm sure you've heard, nature abhors a vacuum. What that means is that when some space opens up in nature, for example, a certain species goes extinct, or nature, an island changes its climate, some other thing comes in and fills that space. Nature abhors a vacuum. That is, nature is a principle that you can rely on. So, in your life, it's the same thing. You can rely on all these principles in the same way. So when you create the space, when you're standing in the gap, stretch it out. What's the rush? There is no rush to finish the painting. Just know that it will come, something will come in time, and be patient and listen for that. Listen for that divine impulse. In fact, only act on divine impulse. And by divine impulse, I mean that's when you feel or hear or just know, this is what I need to do. I need to put some ochre into this painting. I need to do some swirls. I need to walk away. You've got to listen to that voice. And it's scary, but I'm asking you to listen and work in the gap. Be creative in the gap. And I have found, and that's what I recommend in the book, when you stretch that area, new possibilities that you never even thought of fill that space. New opportunities, things that you never thought were possible. So don't rush and fill the room. Don't rush and fill the career or the space in your life. Willingly go into that space and just listen for that divine impulse. Let spirit make it happen. Let this power, this energy, this power that fuels the creative process of this whole planet, of all the solar system, the thing that makes everything work, help you, work with you, as you. So on that note, go out there and pick something in your life and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to move out of it, but I'm not going to fill it right away. Or when next time when you go into the studio and you're working on a piece of creative project, whatever it is, in the areas that you can, and I realize that some of you are working with with materials that harden or dry very quickly. So that's a little tricky, but do the time ahead. Spend some time thinking before you hit into the studio, before you go to the wheel, before you touch the product or cut the glass. Just sit there, be silent, and listen. On that note, go out there and be a spiritual artist. If you were inspired by this message, please feel free to forward it to a friend, ask them to follow my podcast. I'm excited to be building my brand. I'm very excited to share with you that my books are selling very well on Amazon. So please forward this podcast, and you yourself, make sure you follow it. Go up to those 3 little circles, those vertical circles in the upper right corner of the screen, and follow the Spiritual Artist Podcast. And just wait for all the things that will come in and inspire you. Talk to you soon. Have a great week.